But instead, now we have the Congress constantly in session. We have airplane travel. It couldn't be any easier. They're in session pretty much all the time. And recess appointments now there's still the opening for mischief based upon the 9-0 smackdown of the Obama. The Obama position was just untenable, as I said to you. And as we had Senator Mike Lee on, there's just no way you can't have the president rewriting Senate rules. That's just, then the president writes the Senate's rules. The president runs the Senate, right? Can't really have that. But there's still plenty of room for mischief with states now passing sidewalk counselor barring or prevention laws after this decision. They should have actually overruled a previous decision, which was Hill, and said that there must be a universal standard. You know, if you can hand out Planned Parenthood literature on the sidewalk, you can hand out anti-Planned Parenthood literature on the sidewalk. And if you're handing that literature out in front of an abortion clinic or a Planned Parenthood clinic, then people might congregate there and say, well, I think this is a bad idea. That is the heart of the First Amendment. But as I said to you in the last hour, the progressives are willing time and again to completely abandon even the most sacrosanct principles that they claim to hold if it advances a policy agenda, if it advances their power over American culture and the American polity. They're willing to do it. The First Amendment, no impediment here to their designs. First Amendment, this could not have been more clearly in violation of the First Amendment, but the justices, even though they had to back down off of this a little bit, viewpoint neutral? You must be joking. How could they think that this is viewpoint neutral? Based upon what? It's a law specifically passed to prevent certain people from engaging in a certain kind of speech. So this is what I'm telling you. While there's victories today, both 9-0 decisions were the right decisions. They're just the beginning. There's plenty of room still for mischief from the NLRB, from Obama's recess appointments, and certainly from the massive pro-abortion lobby in this country and all of its political adherents. Just as there is a terror within the IRS and within the federal bureaucracy that the American people will finally wake up to just how pervasive the status Leviathan actually is, to how oppressed we are under the boot heels of the petty tyrants that act under regulatory authority and have no real oversight, no meaningful oversight. You got EPA guys surfing pornography 6 hours a day on the job. Another guy saying he's a special CIA officer, almost gets paid $1 million a year for doing nothing. And now the EPA says they lost your emails, by the way, or they lost their emails. Well, I guess they're kind of yours because they're working on the clock and they work for the people, but you know what I mean. There's this, I think, deep-seated anxiety within the bureaucracy that if the people actually knew how bad it was, then they would finally turn on them and demand real accountability, slash budgets, eliminate agencies wholesale, take a look at all these regulations and say no. But we have a long way to go in this fight. I think on the abortion side of the ledger, there has to be an unease for many politicians, many of whom I think actually are pro-choice because that's what they have to say to get elected in whatever district or state they're in. Others perhaps are true believers. But just think about it this way. Oftentimes the progressives like to sort of tout their record on different issues of human or civil rights. And they use that as a club to always beat down the opposition to say, well, you must be racist. We're for racial equity. You must be homophobic. We're for marriage equality. There is a terror, I think, in the minds of progressives of the left in this country that eventually the American people will decide, this whole thing we're doing with abortion, this is a scar on our national identity unlike any other. And it has been evil perpetrated on a massive and nationwide scale. And we will have to live with that. We're not there yet because half the country, roughly, maybe it's 45%, doesn't believe in that. Doesn't think that that's true. If that ever changes, though, just think of what it will do for the party of Planned Parenthood. Their whole moral authority thing is going to ring very hollow. And I think they can see down the line, increasingly, the American people will wake up to this, and that will be the reality in which the statists have to live, that they perpetuated this policy of mass extermination of the unborn for decades. For decades. All right, I have to take a hard turn there into something. We're going to make fun of Lois Lerner now, because otherwise I'm going to get too upset and start throwing things around in the Freedom Hut. The broad voice lines are open, 888-900-3393. We've done our Supreme Court cases for the day. We're going to talk about Lois Lerner, the EPA, and more. Lions and tigers and bears, oh my. Don't go anywhere.
888-900-3393.
You're on the Buck Sexton Show.
Only on the Blaze Radio Network. This is the Buck Sexton Show.
Lois Lerner is really turning into the Bond villain of government bureaucrats at this point. I mean, it's just getting better and better all the time. There was this revelation, came, I think, out last night in the evening, that gives us yet another window. See, this is what's amazing to me. And, you know, I spent a little time, as I've told you many times, in law enforcement, but I also have law enforcement in my family, and I'm very, I'm attuned to these things. You know, I watch Law and Order. Dun, dun. You watch Law. Everyone watches Law and Order. I mean, the problem with Law and Order is you can actually end up binge watching it for like 9 hours straight, and then you actually think you're a defense attorney and you think you know everything. And unfortunately, that show, let's just say it oversimplifies the process. I have a number of friends who are both either in federal prosecutors' offices or work for district attorneys, rather. Where was I? Oh, yes, Lois Lerner, Bond villain. So, of the IRS. Definitely not a Bond girl. And apparently, my voice just broke. So, congressional investigators have said that they uncovered emails Wednesday showing that a former Internal Revenue Service official at the heart of the Tea Party investigation sought an audit involving a Republican senator in 2012. It's from Yahoo News. The emails show former IRS official Lois Lerner mistakenly received an invitation to an event that was meant to go to Senator Charles Grassley, Republican from Iowa. The event organizer apparently offered to pay for Grassley's wife to attend the event. In an email to another IRS official, Lerner suggests referring the matter for an audit, saying it might be inappropriate for the group to pay for his wife. Quote, "Perhaps we should refer to exam," Lerner wrote. That's sort of, you feel like she's basically putting on the rubber glove there. "Perhaps we should refer to exam," the senior IRS official at the center of this whole politicized targeting thing says. Now, why was I talking to you about before I got all Law and Order on you? The circumstantial evidence. People who you'll often hear, and you'll hear this on the bad fake defense attorney who's usually defending a guy who did some unspeakable crime, who goes yachting and wears boating shoes on the weekends. A lot of those in Law and Order. I don't know if you've noticed. Not as many from what I can see in real life. Whatever. So they always say, well, that evidence is circumstantial. Right. Most crimes don't actually have an eyewitness. There's a lot of people go to jail because of circumstantial evidence, actually. And what we have here with Lois Lerner is a whole lot of circumstantial something. We certainly know a lot about her character, about what she's willing to do, about her desire to sort of play political attack dog, always against the Tea Party, always against conservatives and the right. Perhaps we should refer to exam, she said. What's also fantastic about this exchange, by the way, is that the other IRS official, Matthew Giuliano, was like, whoa, Lois, hey, take it easy. Settle it down a little bit there, Lois. What's going on? I know I'm making an assumption about Mr. Giuliano, but, we're getting in character here, everybody. Let's go with it. So Giuliano says it would be Grassley who would need to report the income. And then, now this is fun. This is sort of like I'm doing a one-man show. I guess technically I am. And then she comes back and she drops it. But as has been pointed out now, that this is the kind of thing, Grassley said this yesterday, this is the kind of thing that fuels the deep concerns many people have about political targeting by the IRS and by officials at the highest levels. It's very troubling that a simple clerical mix-up could get a taxpayer immediately referred for an IRS exam without any due diligence from agency officials. Let's just be clear about what this was. An invitation to an event that had not been accepted somehow, and I don't get how this happened, but, I mean, maybe Grassley and Lerner, not close on the keyboard, but who knows, goes to this IRS official, but she sees a Republican who is invited to something, a senator from Iowa who's a Republican, and her first impulse is, maybe we can get him. Maybe we can get him. That's exactly what this is. What else do you need to know about the IRS to know that it is corrupt, to know that it has abandoned it's supposed to be an honest organization, right? It has to be for us to subject ourselves to it. And by the way, I think I've been saying from this room, and as much as I can, I think it should have been abolished years ago, decades ago. We do not need an Internal Revenue Service. Maybe it should be an office somewhere, because, if we're going to have taxation, and I guess, we got to have an income tax, maybe not, get into that another time. But it should just be something, as I said, you can do on the back of a napkin. Okay, I made $50,000 this year. Hey, 10%. It's good enough for the Lord. It's good enough for the IRS. $50,000, 10%. Boom, I write my check. No more loopholes, deductions, social engineering, any of that stuff. Then everybody all of a sudden has some skin in the game in a real and meaningful way. Then you can't be like, I think it was John Kerry when he ran for office. We know he wanted to be the president of the United States. This is the guy who came here, and when it was in his favor, I won medals. I'm really a fantastic soldier. And then he was, of course, defaming his fellow soldiers because that was helpful to him politically. Pretty sure that when he made, and this is off the top of my head, and this is from some years ago, I want to say like $7 million of unearned income. His wife's money, his second rich wife's money. Two women get a lot of money from their husbands. John Kerry finds them both. It's like magic. It's just, it must be love. It has to be. Couldn't be anything else. And I think he paid something like 11 or 12% tax on that $7 million. And now he's out there, just like the rest of them, the Nancy Pelosi's of the world. They want us to be subjected to these IRS clowns. As I've said before, I am so getting audited. So just remember this. Just remember that I stood on the front lines for freedom before, I spend the rest of my days trying to find receipts for a sandwich that I bought 2 years ago. At least I know that I can destroy my hard drive, though. I've got that going for me, which is nice.
Buck Sexton, the Blaze Radio Network.
Get your Team Buck t-shirt at theblaze.com.
Go to theblaze.com/Buck Sexton. That's where you can get all your Team Buck gear. It's fashionable year-round. It's good stuff. I highly recommend it. Commie Bear gear there. We're working on mugs. We've got to get that going. And that's something that I would love very much to start passing out. When we get some of those, little free swag, got to make it happen. But the broad voice lines are open. The number is 888-900-3393. And let's take, was that too fast? 888-900-3393. And Adam from Missouri is on the line. Adam, you're on the Buck Sexton Show.
Hey, Buck, how's the Freedom Hut doing today?
The Freedom Hut is Freedomlicious, sir. Thank you.
Great. So regarding what the Supreme Court ruled yesterday, there's a relevant topic in Missouri currently. The General Assembly passed earlier this year Senate Joint Resolution 27, which is a constitutional amendment to the Missouri Constitution. What it does is adds, in addition to the security that Missouri citizens have in persons, place, property, and effects and papers, it adds electronic data and communications while also requiring specific warrants if those communications or data are to be searched by police.
Right.
And it appears to be the first one, from what I understand, in the nation to be up for a vote of the people. It's going to be coming up this August 5th in our